Good afternoon, YouTube. I'm making this video because recently on Rebel they've come out with something that has proven that Trudeau's government is taking another step towards censorship and communism, essentially to try to regulate and control everything that Canadians can watch online. And they will be the ones who are the gatekeepers and the ones who will judge what is proper material for Canadians to watch. Please observe. Thank you for your attention.
We talk about the scope of this new regulatory body, the new regime. In order to make Canadian content what they call discoverable, easy to access, there'll be the imposition of requirements on what you guys call sharers or aggregators, content creators. I'm going to read you what it says in the report. Links to the websites of Canadian sources of, quote, accurate, trusted, and reliable sources of news with a view to ensuring the diversity of voices. Question, sir. Who will determine what trusted news sources are? The government? Is it appropriate for the government to determine what's a trusted news source?
First thing I have to say is this is a panel that was created by our government in 2018. They went across the country. They've met hundreds of people, experts. They've received close to 2,000 submissions as part of their work. And these are recommendations for the government. As you said initially, there's 97 of these recommendations. So it's not the government of Canada saying this is what we're going to do. This panel is making recommendations to us, and we will be studying these recommendations very closely. I've heard some people say that, oh my God, the government is going to decide what we see on the web. Hold on a second. Canada is not about to take over the World Wide Web. That's not what we're talking about here. Not at all.
So this guy, Ezra, is going to go on, but I just wanted to point out a few other things. You see how the guy muddies the waters? He's talking about some radical idea Canada's going to take over the World Wide Web. Okay. First of all, why are they recommending this at all? Right? They're creating this stupid branch of government, if you will, that's extremely powerful and extremely at their discretion kind of thing. So he's lying, of course, outright lying. And if he's telling the truth, why create the body in the first place? So again, he's lying. This kind of thing, this kind of idea, it's too much power for one small group, and it's a dangerous proposition that they'll continue the dialogue right here.
Yes. Yeah, but sir, to be fair, you've got an agency that wants to enhance its scope of powers to determine what's a trusted news source. So the first question will be, who's to define that? You've got a lot of these groups.
This is a recommendation, Evan.
Okay, no, but the
CRTC hasn't decided.
Okay,
anything.
But they're recommending that. They're recommending that content providers have to register and get a license. So how will this work? How are you going to regulate websites? How are you going to register all that? Do you buy these recommendations?
Well, one of the recommendations, so you're talking about a couple of different things here, but as far as the licensing is concerned, is if you're a distributor of content in Canada, and obviously, if you're a very small media organization, the requirement probably wouldn't be the same as if you're Facebook or Google. So there would have to be some proportionality embedded into this. But we would ask that they have a license, yes. Just like right now, but with the old system in Canada, distributors needed to go to the CRTC and to have a license.
Oh.
So, in other words, Ezra Levant, of course, will be, the rebel itself will be sort of like outlawed, and that the CRTC will have to approve them, otherwise they won't be able to put out their content. So Ezra is probably livid with rage about what they're talking about. But again, this guy here, the heritage minister, I mean, give me a break. This guy, they're using things like heritage or so-called protecting rights and freedoms of the collective, so to speak, so that they can enhance their own power and become more authoritarian and so on, to muscle people that are trying to get the truth out and essentially control media in every way possible. So I've said in subsequent videos, in previous videos, that they will use the Huawei 5G network as a way of observing Canadians, spying and whatnot. And I believe that, because if you even study a little bit in Huawei, you'll find that in Australia they've had similar problems, where an Australian company bought Huawei technology and infrastructure for the purpose of security, and later found out that Huawei was actually spying on the company itself that they sold to. So here we have another issue with the CRTC and controlling media, controlling the narrative and so on. Now you have to license people outside of Canada, inside of Canada. They will make the bureaucracy so convoluted. It'll be only what Trudeau and his goons approve of and nothing else. And it's a time of great fear for people to have something like that occurring under the radar, so to speak. And I applaud Ezra Levant for bringing this, but he has more reason than most to hate the Liberal government. So
I'll just raise some of these red flags. There's a concern that the panel wants to regulate international companies as well. So let me take an example of a controversial site like Breitbart. How would the government force a company like Breitbart, the New York Times, Mother Jones, the Daily Mail, how would they force those companies to comply with rules of Canadian content, discoverability? And if they don't comply, what happens? Will Canadians be blocked from accessing international sites?
Right, yeah. Yes, they will.
I don't think that's what's recommended in the report. That
it's implied,
sites
you
be
fool.
blocked in Canada. I'm not sure I see what the big deal is. I mean, we have an incredible number of international corporations that are operating in Canada in all sorts of sectors, in the financial sector, in the construction sector, in the energy sector. And these companies comply with Canadian rules and laws. We're a sovereign state, and what is true of Canada is true of the United States, and it's true of France and Great Britain and Japan. So we're not asking these companies to do this extraordinary things that no other companies have been asked to do before. We're asking them to simply abide by the rules and regulations that we have in our country.
But Minister, digital world is different than shipping logs, and you know that.
So in a way, he does seek to take over the World Wide Web. I mean, they mentioned Breitbart earlier. They're based in Los Angeles. Breitbart has reporters around the United States, and all you have to do here in Canada is to click on it. Do you think that Breitbart in Los Angeles, lovers of the First Amendment, by the way, do you think they're going to come up to Canada and fill out paperwork and register with Stephen Guilbeault and get a license?
I really like Ezra's approach, man. It's to me, it's actually not funny at all. It's a very serious issue, but you can't help but laugh at life, you know? Like, Trudeau might be the worst thing that's ever happened to Canada. I mean, ever since he took control, it's just been more and more steps towards censorship, towards controlling everything that we're seeing, to spying on Canadians, to controlling this, to controlling that, carbon taxes. Name one thing Trudeau's done that's improved Canada at all. It's a joke, and one must laugh at life because it's a joke, but it's like a tragic joke. What can we do except laugh at it? But essentially, this person right here represents the new radical leftism that's going on in Canada, and it must be it's got to be combated on the grassroots level till enough people get behind that movement that, you know, it's underground, but not really. Essentially what Ezra said is true. If you happen to be a conservative, then you don't buy the official narrative of any of the media outlets because they're all biased against conservatives, right? You ignore people like the CBC and so on. And alternate media is your only option because you're not going to get the truth any other way, except if you go maybe international news. That Daily Mail, that was a good point. But essentially, what the CRTC will do is they'll block the sites. And they will block content creators that are providing us with a servant. True North, Canada Poll, Rebel News, and so on. That these people will be in big trouble. Not exactly trouble, but their content may be blocked somehow, or they'll be sent with litigation, or many other ways of deterring them from producing any anti-Trudeau sentiment or anti-liberal sentiment. And, you know, we learn about censorship in school, even in elementary school and junior high school and so on. And you read about it in history, and they always talk about it like it's in the past tense. I would argue that communism and censorship are more alive than ever in our country. And the implementation of those things is happening subtly, but it's step by step, it's moving towards that. So I looked at this and I feel so upset. It's really that we can have that occurring in Canada means that our Constitution is not adequately prepared for the kind of radicalist nonsense that is happening. And there should be a check or a balance that prevents that kind of control from occurring in a specific group. The CRTC, who checks on them? What authorizes them to have that extreme power? That's too much power for a small group. It's not any authority that is granted them that should be reduced greatly, and there should be somebody to check and balance them. But a reduction in power will do it for me. I mean, they should not have that kind of power. But as many of my viewers know, the left is always using some kind of silly justification, a hypocritical justification, like protecting collective rights, protecting the rights of the collective safe space. We need to progress forward, so we need to do this kind of legislation. You know, it's the inverse. It's a extreme hypocritical view, which sounds good when you say it, but when it's you actually scrutinize it and implement it, it's a form of power grabbing, and that's essentially all it is. So I hope this brings you a little bit. I hope that I can find like-minded people out there that are the same like me. We look at this with extreme concern, and it's not a joke. Thank you for your time and your attention, and take care. Bye-bye.